and it's going to happen when you're doing something live all the time. Okay, are we back? It says it's streaming. Computers don't lie, ever. Nope. I don't see any frame drops.
It works.
It works? We're good? Okay. All right, I'm back. Okay, so vendors, there's also lots of sales-related roles. Some of our grads have gone on to do sort of like pre-sales engineer type work, where you basically go on, you're a technical person, but you're involved in, sort of helping the sales process. If you're into that sort of thing. Whoops, that is not what I meant to do. There we go. All right, so if you want to keep your soul, you don't want to work as a consultant or as a snake oil salesperson. You can also work for in-house security teams. So all the big banks are headquartered in Toronto. There's tons and tons and tons of InfoSec positions at the banks and every other company that's headquartered in Toronto, which is a ton of them. There's sometimes kind of strict hours. There can be minimal overtime requirements. Stuff does still happen. Sometimes it can be shift work as well, depending on the type of position you're doing. And other people who work at the company might hate you because you tell them what they can't do, effectively. That's what you're there for. And you're there, you kind of slap them on the wrist for doing something stupid, clicking on a link they shouldn't click on, etc. You can also work for the government. I think we do have some people that have actually gone on and done, co-op for CSE and or CSIS. They're both constantly hiring. Pay is actually really decent, even fresh out of school. Probably doesn't keep up at the higher levels. That's pretty standard for government jobs, but I imagine pension and benefits are probably pretty sweet for something like that.
The trade-off is job security. With a government job, you have job security.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So what sort of stuff can you do? There's a lot of different subfields. I cannot cover them all. I probably don't even know half of them that exist. Are you guys... I see him laughing. Are they making mean comments? Is that what they're doing? Now I'm going to have to go respond to all these mean YouTube trolls. Okay, but I'm not going to do that. So Leslie Carhart, she's a really cool person in the industry, really knows her stuff. She has a really awesome series of blog posts that basically talk about, very similar to what I'm going to be talking about today. Basically starting a career, different kind of stuff you can do, etc. We're going to cover a bunch of stuff that she's covered in there. And as a disclaimer, I've never worked in most of these roles before, so I could be completely talking out of my ass. It is entirely possible, but I try to be as accurate as I can. All right. Okay, so attacking. It's not necessarily all like attacking. There's sort of different variations of it. So penetration testing, aka pen testing, is what a lot of people think they want to do. I was in that boat. I thought this is what I wanted to do. And for me personally, once I actually wound up doing it, I, after a few months, decided, no, this isn't exactly what I want to be doing. But that's going to happen to probably most of you, unless you're lucky and you hit what you want to do right off the bat. Basically what you do though is you're testing the security of various stuff for clients or even internally. Some of the big guys like Amazon, Facebook have internal pen testing teams that literally just try to wreck shit all the time. Pen tests are often specialized. You'll go and you do a network pen test. You may be testing a specific application that a company's trying to roll out. You may even do physical pen tests where you're actually trying to test the physical security of a building or a group of buildings or something like that. There is a lot of report writing, a lot. Your writing skills need to be up to snuff. You need to be able to write very professionally, and you have to have a lot of attention to detail. And this basically goes for anything you're doing in this industry. Pen testing in Toronto, you can get away with maybe not doing an insane amount of travel, but it's going to vary from company to company. I've seen some firms say about 50% travel for pen testing positions. I've seen lower, I've also seen higher. You also don't just get to go in and like wreck stuff. You are usually working with like a really well-defined scope, and oftentimes it's really narrow. They basically say, well, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't send us phishing emails, you can't actually potentially crash anything, you can't do this. And so you sort of have to figure out, okay, well, what can I do? In general, in terms of skill sets needed, all around technical knowledge is hugely required. Networking, programming, sysadmin stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You need to know a really wide variety of stuff because you're going to you won't always know what you're going to encounter when you actually go out on a pen test. Attacking-ish, vulnerability research. So this is what I do. So there's sort of 2.5 kinds of vulnerability research. There's zero-day research, which is looking for new vulnerabilities that no one's found yet. This is something that usually people who have many, many years of experience will get into. You're typically not going to see a lot of, you're basically not going to see any entry-level jobs for zero-day research unless you've somehow proven yourself already, in the world that is the InfoSec industry. So it doesn't mean you can't try and find zero days yourself and publish them. But it does mean that you're very unlikely to get work straight out of school doing zero-day research. So what I do is end-day research. This is basically understanding and figuring out how to exploit reported and known vulnerabilities. So for example, we've had these big Apache Struts vulnerabilities dropped today that are reportedly responsible for the Equifax breach. So our job is to basically figure out, okay, what did they fix? How would an attack work on the unfixed version, and how can we tell customers how to detect it over a network? So that's basically what we do. Then there's also bug bounties. So this is like kind of the 0.5, hunting for vulnerabilities in a specific organization's application and sites. I'm going to talk more about that in a second. Vulnerability research is often very specialized. I went to a reverse engineering conference in June, and there are guys who literally, like their entire company, they specialize in doing reverse engineering and vulnerability research on like embedded devices, such as, for example, the Cisco IP phone. So like there were guys doing crazy, like they were developing like a small portable EMP to basically do some weird crap to a Cisco IP phone. And there's guys that do specifically mobile vulnerability research, web-based. Internet of Things is obviously a huge thing right now. Skills required, again, a lot of fundamentals, a really insane desire to solve puzzles. You have to be able to read and understand assembly. Typically, you have to understand network protocols, be able to read packet captures, spec documents. You will read a lot of stuff. Bug bounties. You can get paid to legally hack participating, underline, bold, participating organizations. So they have to let you do this. They have to explicitly say you are allowed to do this. Do not go and hack everyone assuming they're going to give you a bug bounty payout for it. Some organizations run their own programs. Others use third parties like HackerOne and BugCrowd to facilitate. Rule number 1 for bug bounty programs is when you're making a submission, don't be a jerk. If you want to see what being a jerk in a bug bounty submission entails, please visit bugbounty.fail. It's quite funny and entertaining and also horrifying all at the same time. When you are submitting a bug bounty, ask yourself these things. Is there an actual security impact we're submitting? If you're curious, go look at past submissions. So on HackerOne and BugCrowd, a lot of submissions become public, and you can actually see all the details, all the communication back and forth, and you can see what's up there. You also got to ask yourself, is it in scope according to the terms of the bug bounty program? Did you go and hack something you weren't supposed to hack? Do you have a detailed report and proof of concept that will allow the organization to easily and reliably reproduce the vulnerability? So one thing we often joke about when we talk about bug bounty programs is we will frequently sort of joke that someone will use sort of an out-of-the-box scanner and scan some website for a bug bounty. The reports always crank out a bunch of what might seem like a vulnerability, but when you actually evaluate what that scanner has turned out, none of it's really valid or it's really insignificant. But people will actually run these scanners, just literally take the raw output from that scanner, send it, and say, look at all these things I found. And they'll basically get told to fuck off. Defending. You can work as an analyst in a security operations center. So when you hear someone say SOC, that's what they're talking about. Is security operations center. It's basically like, you work in one currently. So I mean, essentially, you're monitoring real time, and then if something comes up in your monitoring platform, then you go and you'll do an investigation if you need to. You can do it in-house, or you can work for a managed security services provider, an MSSP, which basically means you're a third-party SOC for other companies. So most of the consulting companies are into this. You've got a lot of companies that specialize in this, and again, a number of our grads do work at companies like that. You monitor events, you perform investigations, you cry, you drink a lot. Defending is really hard, and it's really frustrating for some people. Some people really love it. The hard thing I find for me personally in defending is that when you're attacking something, you always know when you've done something good. You get that feedback loop of saying like, hey, I got a shell on this computer, or I found something bad on this website. You always have that sort of thing that comes up and tells you, hey, good job, here's your treat kind of thing. Whereas when you're defending, just because you haven't found anything doesn't mean your organization isn't owned top to bottom and you're failing miserably. So there's basically just that constant like paranoia and like, well, I don't see anything, but you just become completely paranoid. And this is where we get into things like threat hunting, where, okay, things are quiet, but that just means that the attackers who are in our network aren't making any noise, so we need to find them. So that stuff can get actually really interesting. More experienced analysts get to do things like malware analysis. They contribute towards improvements. But yeah, there's a lot of just kind of sifting through logs and trying to find, okay, why did this alert trigger, and is it actually malicious? And a lot of times it's not. Smart organizations, as I said, are starting to have their SOC teams do proactive threat hunting. Already basically explained that. Every company that has a SOC is hiring, all of them. If they say they're not hiring, unfortunately, it just means they're not hiring you. But they are hiring, I promise you. Building and maintaining defenses. This is a really broad field. You can design and implement specific security controls, systems, and policies. You're basically managing all the blinky boxes, among other things. There is a lot of room for technical and non-technical people here. Now, when I say non-technical, I still, I'll be very adamant and say you need to absorb and know all the technical knowledge that you learn in this program. But at the same time, you don't necessarily have to go into a career where you're directly applying that at all times. But you need to have that background. It needs to be there. Security architects have to understand how everything fits together. Again, generally that's a more senior position, someone who's been around for like 5 to 10 years and knows what they're doing. You can get into doing that security architecting. You can do this as a consultant, vendor, in-house. Government obviously has this kind of stuff as well. Incident response, which is what Equifax should have been doing since July, and I imagine they maybe were. It's basically, how did we get hacked? How bad is it? Who did it? And one thing I forgot to put in there is, are they still in our network? Because that's a big thing when you call someone and say, hey, we think we got hacked. The first thing you need to figure out is, are they still there? There's kind of a running joke that goes on in our industry. We basically say there's only two kinds of companies: those who got hacked and those who don't yet know they got hacked. So you wind up doing a lot of data forensics, lots of malware analysis, but a lot of hunting through logs, trying to put pieces together. We have a few alumni that work for Mandiant FireEye. They're like one of the biggest names in incident response, and we every once in a while have one of them come and do a talk on some of the incident response stuff they do. So if you are interested in that, stay tuned. If you really love programming and code, but you want to apply security to it, application security, aka AppSec, is in crazy demand. It's only going to grow. Software is in everything: your TV, car, phone, light bulbs, fridge, toaster, blender, hairdryer, toothbrush. I recently saw this week a frickin' barbecue, which breaks rule number 1 for me of the Internet of Things, and that is, don't connect fire to the internet. But they're clearly breaking that rule, and they've already broken it once with those Wi-Fi candles, but now they've gone full-on nuclear option.
Yeah, still add-on. Yeah. Once I told my parents that, and so it took time to install the new curtains in the house, and the guy asked, "You want us to hook up the Wi-Fi router?" They remember when I come, and they said,
Good.
No.
Good.
So there you
As
go.
they
Don't
should have.
connect fire to the internet.
As they should have. They should say no to that. So a lot of programmers are terrible at security. The other thing is the bar to entry for putting Wi-Fi on something is so low these days. Anyone, like, companies are just cranking out stuff. Go on AliExpress, go on Amazon, and literally just type like smart. And you will see Wi-Fi connected everything. And I guarantee you, if you want to get into actually doing vulnerability research as well, go buy some cheap crap off AliExpress, and then in 6 months when it finally shows up, connect it to your internet and just start throwing scanners at it. And you will find some horrifying stuff. It's quite funny. But it's a really good like low bar to start learning vulnerability research. In terms of AppSec, though, the industry needs programmers that can help create more secure software, not just write secure code. So, you can write your own code and make sure it's secure, but the actual design of the software has to be done securely, which is really tremendously complicated and difficult. Even web dev on its own is probably a massive enough area just to take up all your time. So if you want to go into AppSec, pick a niche because you're not going to be able to do it all. Auditing. Ugh. I feel bad just saying that, but some people like it. Some people enjoy it. It's not my thing. But basically, you're ensuring organizations are being compliant with whatever standards they're required to. One of the more common ones that people do when they exit this program is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, which is also known as PCI DSS. It's one of the more common ones. There's certainly more. Technical understanding is still important here, even if you're not always hands-on, because you need to be able to evaluate security controls and sort of apply that knowledge to standards essentially. Communication and report writing is again very key. If you struggle with the quality of your writing or the clarity of your writing, I would seriously consider taking like extra courses to help deal with that, because that'll go a long way in this industry. So we're going to talk a little bit just more about the general industry, not so much jobs and things like that, but more sort of community and the people in the industry. So the InfoSec and hacker community is full of a really wide variety of people. And I'll be completely blunt, it is heavily dominated worldwide by white dudes like myself, very similar to the rest of the IT world. So in general, you really need to treat absolutely everyone in this industry with the utmost respect, regardless of race, creed, religion, gender identification, sexual preference, ability. If you don't, the leaders in the community will literally call you out on this shit, and you will basically get blackballed in the industry. People will not work with you. This will severely impact your career prospects because word travels fast. It's a very tightly knit industry, and people talk. If you, like me, are not part of a minority, you do not get to tell people who belong to such groups how to feel about issues specific to them. So I do not get to speak on issues about women's rights other than saying I support it. I don't get to talk on racial issues. I don't get to talk about any of that because I'm not a part of any of those minorities. However, more than welcome to show genuine support for people who do belong to those minorities. It's very important because we're not just securing things for one group of people. We're trying to secure things for everybody, and you have to take everyone's opinions and everything into account when you do that. I myself and most of the community have absolutely zero tolerance for sexism, racism, any other form of discrimination. And yeah, you'll see that very quickly, especially come conference season in the summers, where you get like 25,000 people going to Las Vegas for a conference. There's a lot of booze. There's a very skewed gender ratio, and you will every year, again, without fail, you will find more than one story of, for example, a female in the industry who's experienced outright sexual harassment at this conference. So it is a big problem, but when it does happen, it gets called out. And again, people's jobs and careers get impacted because they don't behave properly. So speaking of the community, the vast majority of the people in the community are really awesome, approachable people. Every conference I've ever been to, every person I've ever talked to on Twitter, you can literally just go up to them, talk to them, tag them in a post, and they'll generally be pretty awesome and very helpful. I highly suggest you make connections and learn by being on Twitter. Meet people at conferences if you can. We'll talk about some of the conferences in a second here. Where do you start? Get on Twitter now. Keep up on it a few minutes a day. Just read, even if you don't understand 90% of the words. Just read. You'll absorb it. Google a couple terms here and there. Go down the Wikipedia rabbit hole. Spend time learning the terminology, learning kind of the flow of how things happen in the industry. I have a good solid list of people to follow. I do not expect you to write all these down or know these right now. But this is like a tiny slice. And what you do is you follow them, and then you see who they retweet, and you follow those people, and so on and so forth. But yeah, this is a very tiny list. I follow probably around 600 or 700 InfoSec specific people on Twitter. And that's how you stay on top of it, and that's how you learn. But again, you can grab this from the slides when I post them. As far as interacting with the community, do reach out to people on Twitter for advice and mentorship. A lot of people will openly offer and say, hey, I'm willing to be a mentor for someone in this industry. And more often than not, no one asks them. They will openly say, please contact me if you want a mentor. And literally, no one will message, no one will take them up on that offer. So there's plenty of those. Participate in discussions when you feel comfortable doing it, even if it's only that you want to ask clarifying questions. So don't be afraid of being new. Everyone was new once. We weren't all born with all this knowledge and stuff like that. But very important to be humble. Always be open to the chance that you're wrong about something, and be quick to defer to someone with more experience. So that's pretty important. If you think you kind of know better than this person, it's maybe there's a chance they have a bit more experience at this thing than you do. Do not use the community as your personal Google. If someone's talking about something on Twitter and there's like a term you don't understand, don't tag them and say, what's that? Just like Google it. It's what it's there for. Also, don't demand things from people. Ask nicely. Don't say, do this for me. And try not to go around trying to prove other people wrong constantly. It's a bit of a problem in this industry. You'll see like the big, InfoSec rock stars get into arguments on Twitter about once a week, and I'll usually post a picture on Twitter to signify this whenever people get in a Twitter fight. But it's because there's a lot of strong egos involved in this industry, and people will try to prove each other wrong constantly. And all it does is make the other person feel bad. And even if you are right, it just kind of makes you look like an asshole. And again, it will affect your reputation in the industry. You don't want to be that guy or girl. IRC. IRC is still around. If you don't know what it is, it's basically one of the first widely used popular real-time chat protocols. It's still used somewhat. It's not as popular as it was in the past, thanks to some other things we'll talk about. IRC networks are basically formed by a bunch of different servers all linked together. A lot of IRC networks have web-based clients available. You probably want to use a proper client, though. The free nodes network is a very good place to start. Security, Linux, and RE are pretty good for starters. Best thing to do on IRC, join some channels and just lurk and read. You learn a lot of stuff. And that's how I started when I was really young, kind of learning about hacking and all that kind of stuff, was just idling on IRC channels. We also have our own IRC network. Not that many people are on it, but it is connected to our MatterMost platform. So the people who are very adamant about only being on IRC, you can still talk to them, just not privately. Slack and MatterMost, it's like IRC on steroids. Generally it's invite only like ours is. Pretty nice web, desktop, and mobile clients. I know people are going to complain that MatterMost is not as good as Slack, and I will agree, but there's reasons why we're on it. Technically it's intended for teams, people who work together, but it's been co-opted for communities. MatterMost is a self-hosted Slack clone, and the #1 reason why we run it instead of using Slack is we have control over our data. You can create your own private channels on our MatterMost, so if you want to create a channel for a particular group of people in a class, or like for all first-year students or all second-year students, you're more than welcome to do that. And if you don't have the invite link for it, it's on the subreddit, and anyone who's already on there can invite you to it. So yeah, no problem there. Blogs. A lot of security blogs. Some are run by companies. They can potentially have an agenda. Most of the ones I've listed here are pretty good. So like Naked Security is associated with Sophos antivirus, but it's actually a pretty solid blog. But yeah, a few good ones to start with. again, this is the kind of stuff that we talk about every 2 weeks in sessions for the first hour, is that sort of news. But yeah, read them. Just watch out for hacker news because it's sometimes pretty clickbaity, and sometimes they're not always perfectly accurate. Conferences. A lot of conferences are incredibly expensive. They're intended for industry people who are being paid to attend. Some provide student pricing or are generally inexpensive. But conferences are really critical for meeting people, and you will always learn something. Now, for me personally, conferences were incredibly useful while I was in school and maybe for the first couple of years. Now that I'm in a job I really, really like, I don't necessarily care as much about going to conferences. Other than for some people, it's kind of it's sort of like a free trip, and I get to go hang out with people and network and stuff like that.
You add tasks to your list. It's once a month.
Oh yeah. And also OWASP as well meets every 4 times a year, something like that, like quarterly. Huh? Well, these I'm getting to there. Patience. This is local conferences. I'm getting there. Patience. Oh, DEF CON Toronto. Yeah, it exists. Right. None of these things are things that I don't go to anymore. So.
Also, conferences are good for annual T-shirt shopping.
Not all of them, though. Not all.
Where do you think I got this from?
The big ones.
Yeah. Well, that's where I got this from. But, anyways, so local conferences. Sector in October is sort of the big one in Toronto. It's quite expensive. There's often student rates though, and every once in a while, Sheridan may pay for like a limited number of students. Every once in a while, there's no guarantees on that. Sometimes they do it. BAISc Toronto. It's inexpensive. It's small, and it's a great place to meet people.
So, how much basic knowledge should you have to start?
Zero.
Absolutely.
None.
Go there.
If you can turn a computer on, go to the conference.
We get a quick hands to see who's here one.
Yeah. How many of you guys are first year?
Second year. Year ones, you can look around. Second year, anybody here? Second, third year.
Third year. Woo! All the third years came to play tonight. Okay.
And alum. So you can see that there's a lot of people here from all different levels of the program. So draw on their knowledge as well. Like if you guys are having problems in class or whatever, I'm always my door's always open to help out.
Yes, and what MatterMost is very good for. Literally, you ask questions on MatterMost, people will answer technical questions for you. They will not do your homework for you, though. They won't.
On top of that, for the rest of your class and whatnot, you can know that there's a vast amount of knowledge here in this every 2 weeks that go out to ISS and just get in the program and really hone in on what security is. So that's the only reason why.
And we'll kind of get into some of like why to do that in a bit as well. Other major conferences, DEF CON in Vegas. It's the biggest hacking convention in the world. Every August. You need to go to this at least once, says me, the hypocrite, who has not been and will not go at least for the next 3 years for some certain reason. Black Hat in Vegas, which basically happens the same week but just before DEF CON. And B-Sides Las Vegas is held during the same time, which is actually free, but there's a limited number of people that can get into it. And it's awesome in terms of the content. They stream a lot of their talks online, and it's pretty cool. ShmooCon, pretty good conference in January in Washington, D.C. DerbyCon is another very popular conference. Chaos Computer Clubs, also known as C3, is essentially DEF CON Europe. Okay, never mind. And there's basically like a conference every week worldwide. Some conferences have kind of specialized purposes, like I said, like Recon that I went to. It's a reverse engineering conference. I didn't understand like 80% of what they talked about there, but it was cool nonetheless. Learning resources. All those conferences we just talked about, most of the talks become freely available online or even streamed live. There's online CTFs or capture the flags. You can basically start learning, hacking and all sorts of different stuff surrounding the industry in a controlled, safe environment that you're allowed to do stuff to. These two are my personal favorite. I recommend them to everybody, Ring Zero Team and overthewire.org. If you're new, especially new to Linux and stuff like that, start with Bandit, the Bandit game on Over the Wire. It's a really good way to sort of just like make you learn Linux and the command line very quickly. So it's pretty awesome for that. If you get more into doing CTFs and that kind of stuff, you can check out ctftime.org for info on like time-limited CTF competitions, so ones that run over a weekend or something like that. And you can get together with friends, play as a team. We used to quite frequently do the in-person CTF at Hackfest, which is in Quebec City. So a bunch of us would usually go every year, and we'd compete in the CTF, and it was always a lot of fun. Your brain's dead by the end of it, but you learn a lot, and there's a lot of really helpful people just like walking around. Oh, what are you working on there? Oh, cool. Have you tried this? And you really just it's a lot of fun. We will also be holding a Sheridan CTF hopefully in December if I get my act together, because I will be running it in conjunction with Nick and some other folks. But yeah, we're shooting for about December, and it's going to be like what we would call entry level. So we're going to try and make it so that it's interesting for all 4 years. And we're going to try and make it so that we pair you up with some more experienced people, so you can learn a lot of stuff that way. More learning. OpenSecurityTraining.info. These are some great, super technical videos. If you really want to get into reverse engineering and like assembly and malware reversing and vulnerability research and all that kind of stuff, this is an awesome place to go. The videos are maybe a little dry, but the content is gold. And that's where I learned assembly, is literally from those videos. Cyberray.it has a lot of free InfoSec training, a lot of good stuff up on there. And there's tons of books. There's a book for like every topic you can imagine. And there's also sort of more, I guess broader books that are maybe not super technical.
Lynda.com has a bunch of them as well. You don't have to listen here, but Lynda.com, you actually, because you're part of Sheridan, Lynda.SheridanCollege.ca, you
Yeah.
your one-time your SSO login and your
Yeah. And then as soon as you leave, they'll cut it off the day after you graduate.
No.
Access.
You still have access.
Haven't been
You still
here
have access.
Nope.
for years.
Well, they cut yours off.
They cut it off because they put you into a different user group, and then you get cut off. Same thing with DreamSpark and all that kind of stuff.
Maybe I should.
Anyways, so a big recommendation for me in terms of sort of general books, just to kind of get you thinking about the industry and what you're actually in this industry for. Beyond Fear by Bruce Schneier. His new book, Data and Goliath, is pretty awesome as well. If you're looking for a book on a particular topic, just ask someone. Chances are someone's probably read it. If you're looking for an introduction to a particular area, there's always a book for that. As a student, you also have access to books 24/7, tons of stuff on there as well. Keep an eye on Humble book bundles for when No Such Press is featured. There was actually a Wiley cybersecurity bundle as well. So you can basically get a ton of books for like $10, and they're pretty awesome. Certifications. I had to use the meme. I had to do it. I'm sorry.
What does it say?
What does it say?
Actual useful stuff.
So certs is what he's looking at. He's looking away from actual useful stuff you should learn. So you're going to learn about the existence of a lot of different certifications. There's CISSP, SANS GX Cert, Security Plus, CEH, OSCP, OSCE, etc., etc., etc. As I say in bold, do not worry about these at all until you are in the industry. If you really, really want to do one of them, like I'm not going to stop you or anything, but do not waste your money, in my opinion, at this point in time. Most of them are fairly expensive, and when you're looking for your first job, there's zero expectation that you're going to hold any of these certifications. Many employers will pay for them once you work for them if you present a good business case or if they just have training budget they want to use up. And some professional services firms will practically require you to get your CISSP once you have the work experience, and of course they'll pay for it. Deloitte, for example, is one of those companies where you work for them. They will basically say, okay, you got the work experience, go to your CISSP, all paid for, everything like that. My personal opinion is that the purpose of certifications is twofold. Looks good to potential clients when you're in consulting, and it looks good to prospective future employers looking for experienced hires. So it's a good way to get past the HR firewall. Some of the certs may actually teach you something useful, but don't count on it. OSCP, OSCE is a really good example of a cert that will force you to learn useful new stuff. CEH, Certified Ethical Hacker, is a good counterexample. Don't do it. just don't consider it, please. And like as an example, EC Council, who owns the CEH cert, for about, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks last year or the year before that, their website was serving up ransomware. And it took them like 2-3 weeks to fix it. So I wouldn't really trust their certification at all, just based on that. Haley? Okay, job hunting. Don't worry about it yet, at all. Just in case you are worried about it, there's mandatory 8-month co-op between 3rd and 4th year. There's also a new and optional 4-month general IT co-op between 2nd and 3rd year. Some of you guys just finished that. Wes? As long as you work hard during co-op, you will generally have a job waiting for you once you're done school. This is the easiest way to start your career. You might not want to work there long term, but the experience and contacts you will make will open up your opportunities like crazy. Just as an example, within 4 months of working co-op at Deloitte, I knew people that worked at every single major consulting firm in Toronto, just because turnover is that bad at these consulting firms that, you know, someone you just worked with, oh, they're going to, you know, Ernst & Young, oh, this person's going to KPMG, oh, this person's going to PricewaterhouseCoopers. So you will just, by being in one place and knowing people, you will automatically have connections at all these other companies over a period of time. If you have connections, use them. Cold applying for jobs almost never works these days. The HR firewall is brutal. And the easiest way to get in and to get an interview is to actually, you know, lean on some sort of a connection. It doesn't even have to be a really solid connection, just like, oh, I talked to this person one time, and that's it. Making your way through the program. So again, those of you who are kind of in the midst of this, you probably are kind of fully aware of all this, but you're still in it, and you're still it's still gonna be painful in some parts. If you weren't already aware, this program is rigorous and challenging. Don't let the fact that you are at Sheridan College and not U of T or Waterloo fool you into being complacent and thinking you can coast through this. This program requires effectively full-time job hours when you combine the in-class time and the classwork, study, and reading time. Depending on your current level of knowledge, first year may not feel like that. You know, if you already have a fair bit of sort of general knowledge and you're good at picking up programming, that kind of stuff, it's maybe not going to feel that way. But don't expect second year to be the same way, because it hit me like a ton of bricks. For you young people, maybe not so many of you, but many of you maybe have come straight out of high school, or you're like me and you just kind of act like it sometimes. There won't necessarily be a lot of required work that counts for marks, but do not let that fool you into not doing the work. The guys who are already through this, they know what it's like. They've been through that, and you know, when it comes to exam time, if you haven't done a lot of that optional work, it's painful. Read the recommended textbooks, make notes while reading. If you don't make notes while you're reading, you're just like paging through the book, you're not going to retain anything at all. If you're just starting to learn programming, write a shit ton of code. Like, go nuts, write code every day. Take exercises from the textbook, even ones that aren't specifically assigned to you. Do them. You're going to thank me come exam and assignment time, I promise, because that was one of the biggest things I saw people struggle with last year and first year was programming was really rough for them, and it was because they just didn't practice enough. Yep?
Just on that quick note, for the first year, you have intro to C right now, right? You're not going to touch it again until the second half of the second year, I believe. Don't drop it. That keep up on it, or
yeah, keep it up.
Or algorithms and data structures is going to ruin your day.
Yep.
And then in third year, you're going to use it again in operating system design, and again, it will ruin your day. So just you don't have to keep keep having C code every year.
Yeah, play around with stuff once in a while.
But be comfortable with that when you go back, you know, oh, I remember how to do this now, and then go after 5 minutes in Google, you're like, oh, I don't do this. Just keep that up, because it's kind of easy to.
Well, and not only that, the more you practice when you're going through the class, the quicker you'll pick it up again when you've had some downtime as well. Okay, my in-class recommendations that you're all going to completely ignore. This actually applies to all of you in every year, because some of these things I didn't really learn until sort of third and fourth year when things got really tough. So I make these recommendations as the person in my graduating class with the highest cumulative GPA. I didn't coast to get there. I worked my ass off. I put in tons of hours. I basically put the rest of my life on hold when I was in school, as much as I could. Most professors are not going to bother you if you're on Facebook, Twitter, playing Dota, LOL, Hearthstone, some other shitty game. Yeah, I said it. I said it. I did it. It does not mean it is a good idea to do this just because you can. My worst grade in the class is literally because I was focused on my laptop for one 3-hour class that happened to cover about half of what wound up being on the final exam.
What were you focusing on?
It wasn't even anything useful. I think I was like tinkering with a server or something like that, and
Not the lecture.
it was not the lecture, regardless. Like I was not paying attention to the lecture, and that literally wound up covering, like that one class wound up being half of the content on the final exam. So yeah, that was the lowest mark I got the entire program, was because of that. Big suggestion, okay, radical idea here. Close your laptop unless it's necessary. Like if you're following along with a hands-on example, write your notes by hand. There's actual research to show you learn more by doing this due to differences in cognitive processing between typing and writing. I filled up notebooks like crazy, and the secret for me was I almost never, unless it was something very specific that maybe wasn't in a textbook or slide or something like that, I almost never actually went back and reviewed those notes. Typically what I would do during review is I would go through slides and textbooks and stuff like that, and I would basically rewrite notes based on textbook material or other materials given to us. But in general, writing notes by hand makes a massive difference. I really did feel that it was easier to recall and retain information when I did that. But it is hard. You're sitting in a 3-hour class. It's not always going to be exciting, wonderful material. Sometimes it's really dry. Sometimes it's really boring. But if you can push through and keep the laptop shut, you will do better, I promise. And don't be afraid to ask clarifying questions in your classes if you've been paying attention. You've been gapped out for a few minutes. That happens. Wait till a break or the end of class to actually clarify that. Non-class time. Find classmates to study with and share knowledge. Help each other understand. When you actually try to teach each other stuff, you will enhance your own understanding greatly. Read ahead when possible. Lectures make a lot more sense when you already have a bit of an understanding of what's actually going on. And don't leave anything to the last minute. Something's going to go wrong. I promise. It does every single time. You think, oh, this program I got to write sounds easy. Whatever, I'll do it like in the morning before class when we have to hand it in, or it's due at midnight in the Dropbox, and it's like 10 o'clock. I can still hammer out like another game. Don't do it, because something's gonna go wrong, and you're gonna get hit for it. A big thing I see a lot of people struggle with, and I myself did for the first couple years. Balancing and prioritizing, what you're here for. Procrastination is going to be the death of you. We're all guilty of it. I did struggle with it a ton, even during grad project in 4th year. If you're a gamer like me, use game time as a reward for completing something. If you game first, you're not going to stop and get your stuff done. Like you all know that I'm speaking truth when I say this. You're not going to stop. Do not sacrifice sleep and food. Pulling all-nighters is not helpful. It's not going to do anything useful for you. It's going to impact your ability to learn and comprehend, and you need your brain working at full capacity in this program. Using your brain as much as we have to when we're learning this stuff is physically draining. So you need to be sleeping. You will work more effectively. If you're privileged enough not to need to work a part-time job, don't do it. Maybe you won't have as much spending cash, but honestly, just don't if you don't have to. If you do need to work, because I obviously respect that some people need to, I myself did need to after the first year, you have to become a master at scheduling everything in your life, and you have to have the discipline to stick to that schedule. And some people do it, and some people can't. That's the reality. Your reputation. We already kind of talked about this a little bit. But especially as it relates to this program, information security is a really small community, especially in Toronto, very tightly knit. You cannot go to almost any InfoSec-related company in this city and not find someone who is an alumni of Sheridan or someone who knows an alumni of Sheridan. They're absolutely everywhere. The reputation you create yourself in school is going to follow you. In my short career, I've already been asked my opinion on classmates or students who are simply part of the program, not people I even really know that well, multiple times. I've been asked to review their resumes. I've been asked to provide opinion on like work ethic and things like that, or sort of what I know about them. And people who are in your program. So I've only been graduated since 2015, and I'm already starting to participate in interviews and things like that, right? So that reputation in school is going to follow you around. Having a reputation for working your ass off is more valuable than having amazing grades. You can shoot for both, but again, if your grades aren't great, but you worked super hard, people are going to respect that a lot more. How not to piss people off. Be dependable. If you agree to a deadline, stick to it. Don't be a leech. I think it's safe to say, like, most people who come to something like this, except for maybe Hillary over there, apparently. Just based on the gestures that are happening in that direction. But like, generally people who come to something like this are people who are eager and like to kind of, are okay with doing the work and really are interested in this stuff, right? But you're going to encounter people, especially early on before you've figured out who's who and what people are like. People will try to leech off you. It's going to happen. People will try to get away with doing no working group projects, or literally just trying to ask you, how'd you do this? How'd you do this? How'd you do this? Okay, I had someone that did that constantly to me. Yeah, and you're not going to learn anything if you do that, and people are going to resent you. Also, don't be afraid to admit you don't know something. Don't start making stuff up because it's just not helpful, and offer to help figure it out. And I've said it again, people do not like to be told they're wrong. So even if your classmates are wrong, just be careful how you handle it. Lean on third-party sources, a professor or, like a reputable post on the internet or something like that. But yeah, try not to just like rub it in people's faces, because that's how you get people angry at you. And again, if you get a reputation of someone who sort of has that ego and wants to prove people wrong all the time, I've literally had people not get hired because their personality was not agreeable for working in a team atmosphere. Listen a lot. Pretty cool quote there. It's amazing what you'll listen if you can keep your mouth shut. Most people want to talk. If I listen to people, they actually pay attention, and I ask questions. I don't try to tell them everything I know, because usually they know more than I do anyway. And that's true. You may know more than someone about a particular topic, but they probably know way more than you about a completely different topic. So you always have stuff you can learn from people. Stay out of the gossip. It's so hard. I know. I'm so guilty of this myself. But even if you feel the same way as someone who's sort of unleashing the gossip, take the high road, keep it to yourself, just keep your mouth shut. And this is not the same thing as honest, well thought out criticism. Don't let people just take advantage of you because you're keeping silent. If someone is, for example, constantly trying to leech off you, you can call them out on it. That's okay. I'm cool with that. Treat school like a workplace that's a bit more fun. It's fine to be ridiculous, joke around, but you got to know when to turn it off and get down to work. So remember that whole diversity thing we were talking about. This program, in my experience, has had pretty decent racial diversity compared to, say, like a Silicon Valley startup. And in terms of the overall trend in like IT and in InfoSec, I think we have a really good spread. And Toronto in general is actually, I find, pretty good. Most of my workplaces have been fairly racially diverse. However, we do have serious issues with gender diversity, as I'm sure you've noticed in your classes. Unfortunately, this sometimes has led to some less than awesome treatment of our female colleagues. I don't mean to single anyone out here, but sorry. I have to say it. So understanding that not everyone in the program is here in this moment, listening to me rant, I challenge all of you to call out sexist and other discriminatory behavior. Set a good example for your peers who aren't here to listen to me scream at you. Very, very, very important, because again, this is something that comes up all the time in the industry, and several careers have been ruined because of the way they've treated a member of the opposite gender. So guys, I say this to you because I have to hammer this home really hard. There's a much lower number of women in the program than men, obvious. Women have just as much right to be in the program as you. You do need to treat your female colleagues as equals. If I ever hear anything about someone not knowing something technical because they're a girl, I'm going to absolutely lose my shit on you. If a classmate rejects your romantic advances or seems horribly uncomfortable, apologize and leave them alone, and maybe don't call them derogatory names to your buddies after it happens. You're laughing because you know it happens all the time, and it's true. If I was ever handed a resume from someone who didn't follow the above, I would immediately set it on fire, period. Straight up. I don't know a single workplace that is okay with having someone around that behaves like that. So, yeah. That's all I'm going to say about it. And now, we go drink after Lee's talk. So thanks, everyone. You can reach out to me anytime on Twitter, MatterMost, IRC, whatever. I'm more than happy to answer questions about basically anything. Even if you're having, even if you're just struggling in the program, you don't even want any particular help, please come talk to me. I've been there, I've been through it. I know what you're going through. So that's it. All right, so we're gonna have like a 5-minute break. Just get set up with Lee. So if you guys want to stretch your legs, grab some water, walk around a bit, whatever, please go do that. And we'll be back. All right, everybody. My pleasure to introduce Lee Kagan. He's, I think he's returned the most times of any guest speaker so far. We love having him here. So he's going to kind of share about basically his whole journey through this crazy, wonderful industry of ours. All right, so Lee, please take it away.
Yes, sir.
And use the clicker if you want.
Ooh. What button actually does it?
Forward.
No, just
forward.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Hey guys, how's everyone doing? Good. Cool. Good to see some of you again. Recognize some of the faces. Thanks so much for having me back here. I love coming and talk to you guys. So what I'm going to come talk to you guys today about is something, it's actually a phrase I've been saying for a while, and I finally get to use it as like a title for something called failing upwards. Basically this idea how mistakes are inherent to your progress and, you know, learning and getting better at stuff. It's not always a negative, but overall, really, I'm just going to talk about my experience in the last while of working in InfoSec. So really what we're going to go through is a little bit about me. I'm going to step you through my journey. There's not a lot of slides here, so I'm going to do a lot of talking. All right, hopefully that's okay. It's a little different because usually I do more technical talks, but I wanted to kind of set up the stage for the things I've experienced. I'm not going to speak for the industry, just what I've seen. The State of the Union is really how I see things that are unfolding as we speak, current trends, issues, and things like that, and whatnots and have-yous and so on and so forth. Misconceptions and roadblocks, the different things that I believed at first or that I became too jaded about and was unwilling to change that would end up hurting me later on in life, and some things like that. And then finally, picking your battles, which is the notion of you do get to choose where you fight. You know, you're not always stuck into a fight that you can't control, which really is just a way to sum up, you know, you have choices, you have options. So a little bit about me. There's my Twitter thing. If you can't recognize me, just look for the big stupid hand. So my name is Lee Kagan. I work for Red Black. I'm the Road Team principal. Road Team is our adversary engineering unit. So I lead that team. On Twitter, I'm at InvokeThracky. If any of you guys want to get in touch and talk to me, please do. Certs and all that, yeah, I have some, whatever. I'm not one of those, but yay. And mainly my primary area of focus is in Active Directory attacks, post-exploitation of Windows enterprises, and I design all the command and control systems for the Red Team. So here's just more stuff and things. Yeah, again, you're right. Like IS has like the most things out of anything else I've done. Just some recent stuff, if any of you guys are interested, that I've done. I'll put some of the links up somewhere. And yay, it's a movie time. The reason I say that is actually, let me go back. The very last slide there, or very last point, sorry. I co-created something called C3X, and I'm going to do a very shameful plug here, I'm sorry. But we designed this thing for students, so that's why I bring it up. And we just finished our beta run of this. And the next one that we're going to do hopefully sometime early next year. And actually the purpose of this thing ties in a lot with what I'm going to speak about and a bit of what I caught at the tail end of John's there. And we want to actually extend the invitation to you guys when we do this next one. So to show you what that is.
Cybersecurity is one of the fastest growing industries today.
Let me reset that.
Cybersecurity is one of the fastest growing industries today and is projected to triple in size over the next 10 years. Companies need cybersecurity.
Any ideas, John?
Maybe it's because it's dying, it's streaming at the same time.
What if I just preview it?
Yeah, sure.
Would that work?
Yeah, just don't have full screen. When
Stand by.
something always goes wrong, right?
Cybersecurity is one of the fastest growing industries today and is projected to triple in size over the next 10 years. Companies need cybersecurity talent. This is their training ground. Meet Red Black, a team of experienced white hats, computer security specialists who break into protected systems to test and assess their security. They take their job very seriously.
This is legit.
Most of the time. But today, they are the enemy. They'll be hacking 2 teams to see who's got the chops to keep their data defended. 2 schools will battle it out to defend their networks against hackers. It's school versus school. They'll earn points for fending off attacks, completing challenges,
One of our users just received an extortion email.
and dealing with management.
But right now, I gotta know, do we pay this thing or don't we? That's priority.
When the clock starts, they have 5 hours to protect the network.
Your goals, as usual, identify, isolate, eradicate. Pretty straightforward, right? No, it's a little bit more complex than that. You're walking in a situation where you do not know this network or this setup or the capabilities that you got or the views.
And the hackers have a plan.
Let's get through it, but I just want to dig in. I just want to increase the The key thing that's going to make that a success is how well you communicate.
This is my Oh man, I'm feeling very excited, but also very cautious at the same time. Who has 15? We're going into an environment that we really don't know.
So that's what I'm saying. This is not bad.
Everybody's very excited to do very well here. I mean, obviously it's a competition, so we want to win.
Alright, they're all freaking out. You guys got out of your chairs in like the last hour?
But in this world, things can turn on dime.
Fools. Here. Okay, I'm in.
We are pretty good. We will try our best to protect this network and like hack them back if possible.
Yeah. But they found our IP address, just that, and blocked it. All of our access would be gone. Oh my Jesus. But they identified its IP. I'm guessing it's still not blocked. Deep breath. These are intensive. This room for a change. They're killing us.
This could be a game over situation.
One of those machines might start smoking.
For real, or is this a game?
100% for real. 100% for real.
Right, so now they're giving us shells that are running our malware on their computer.
So they're doing malware analysis and infecting themselves.
Yep.
It's great.
Yeah.
These are all the users that have pin complaints.
Basically, we own the network now.
What do I tell my boss?
Yes, thank you.
I thought we were under a major attack.
Then why would they tell me I don't have a problem?
Because you're mad. Keep popping message boxes up. So let's run the cat.
It was a very close battle, but George Brown came out on top.
At the end of the day, winning or losing really is not a factor because they're all going to be defending the same organizations and working together. I would say it's a very unique experience you cannot get from anywhere else.
You guys did an awesome job. I'm not just saying that, you really did.
I'm seeing talent in this room. You should all feel very good. You guys have fun? Yeah. Awesome. Oh, I'm ready for bed. Oh, thank you. Hey man, you pick who you want. We'll invite them. Basic reason I wanted to show you that. Long story short, it's we tried to introduce something I compete in every year called the CCDC down in the U.S. It's where we form a very giant red team and we attack a really large amount of schools down in the United States. But we don't have anything up like that, up here. So we wanted to start that, and we just did that one this year, and it was sort of a pilot thing. But really, the idea was we wanted to approach students and basically say, hey, like you're learning all this stuff, why don't we put it to the test? And the people you're fighting against have been doing this for 10 years or more. So it's a little unfair in that regard because that's kind of the reality of defending any network, right? You have no idea who you're going up against. So reason I wanted to just stick that in there other than my own promotional reasons was just to say, if that looks cool to you guys, we'd absolutely, with their blessing, would like to have you guys compete in the next one if you're interested. Cool. Okay, back to me getting negative about stuff. Aw. Yeah, movie.
Make sure you got PowerPoint up on the main window.
That would help. It's the most useful sideline commentary ever. Nope, I'm just screwing things up there. That's okay. Okay, so just a little bit of background about me and sort of how this all started and kind of where I got to where I am now. As long as I can remember as a technical kid, I liked fidgeting with gadgets, I liked mechanics, I was fascinated with how stuff worked. Even when I had like no intention of like either following through with the study or like putting it back together, I was just like, what does this do? You like open up, you're like, hey, that's our new television. I think probably most people, if not everyone in this room, probably has a bit of that, right? You're just sort of drawn to what is under the hood. I need to know how this works, otherwise I will not sleep, that kind of thing, which is important, and eating, just like John said. But originally, music was actually my main passion. I've been playing music for a long time, started at the Royal Conservatory in classical theory and studying. I worked as an audio engineer. Sorry? What instrument? Started with piano and mainly guitar. And I worked as audio engineer, worked in recording studios, went to school for it. I opened up a small independent record label at one point. And through that entire process, the thing I was really obsessed with the most was like the gear and the tech. Like I loved pedals, I loved signals, amps and tubes. And when digital audio came in, oh my God, everything changed. I don't have to like flip a tape reel back and like rewind it. Now I can just keep recording. It kept coming back to technology. No matter what I did, there was always this underlying thread of keeping tech somehow involved with whatever phase I was in life. And I think that's a piece of evidence of, maybe where we're all going to end up in some capacity. Doesn't mean InfoSec, but probably something that has a technological component to it, right? So it was important that I had that in whatever I was doing. Now in school, that was fun. I was not a good student at all. I was terrible. Weirdly, like I don't mean to brag, but like I was really good when I was in school. I'd do really well in assignments. I loved English writing. I loved reading really advanced stuff. I loved sciences. I loved history specifically and geography. But I was like a bad kid in school. Like I liked to fight, I'd skip, and all that kind of stuff. And this seemed cool in the moment, and I've no pride in that now. It's actually something that really ended up hurting me later in life. So I mean, when I was starting out, I wish there was something like this. That would have been so cool. There really wasn't anything that I felt was a good outlet for me. So it kind of veered off the rails a bit. But regardless of that, I loved learning things, and this is 100% true. And if any of you don't believe me or anything, my father is in the audience tonight, so he can verify some of this stuff. When I used to skip school and basically not go, you had to be out of the house. I didn't want to go, so like either go to school to find your other friends who were willing to skip with you, and if they weren't willing to, I had to go kill like 8 hours. So what I would actually do was go hang out at the Toronto Reference Library. It was like the only thing I can think of where I could just like spend no money and hang out all day. And what I would do with the time is, I know it sounds corny, I would read. I would go through random categories. I'd read stuff like occult and regime changes in different parts of the world, like really random stuff. And I found I started getting really drawn to something that I still continue to read constantly. I read a lot about military history. I read a lot about geopolitics, specifically in much more feudal times. I find it very interesting, the history of the past. Well, that's kind of a redundant statement, but it repeats itself, so I find it's worth knowing a bit about, right? And then, this sort of seems off topic, the first shell I ever saw, I didn't even know what InfoSec was. I don't think that label existed yet. I think I had a Windows 95 computer, and my friend who was a couple years older than me, I'm about 10 at the time, he called me from his house a few blocks away and told me how we can connect our two computers and chat. This was probably around like when IRC was like pretty much the thing. BBSs were started going away. And it was Telnet. I don't know what Telnet was. I don't know what he just told me what to do on my computer. He connected to it, and I could see him typing. So we were just doing like this basically, old school TCP session chat kind of thing. And instantly my mind was blown. Because what I had realized was two things. One, by this point, a friend had already given me the Anarchist Cookbook. So I was just like, ooh, there's all these interesting things out in the world of evil stuff we can do. And I was on that thing. And then I didn't know that one computer could like connect to another computer and like do stuff. I didn't really understand that. That's the nature of like server client mentality. And it clicked immediately. I was like, oh, one computer can connect to another computer and do stuff. That's got to have some implications. But there wasn't like enough out on like the internet at that time for me to think what those things might be, But it was definitely the beginning of something that would plant a seed in the back of my head that probably wouldn't kick up for about another 10 years or so. Now, we're going to kind of jump forward a little bit to how I actually got started and sort of the steps I went through in this time. I had no formal training at all. I didn't go to any schools. I didn't have any certifications. But because I was kind of a technical kid, what I really started out doing was like home networking, like for myself, my friends, for my friends' parents, that kind of thing. Like it comes up your router, comes to do your printer, all that kind of stuff. And it actually became a huge passion of mine, which was networking. I really fell in love with networking. And it was one of those things where I think there was just enough info on Google at the time, so I could like kind of run to another room and Google what the hell I just did in the admin interface and be like, yeah, no, SMTP's up. I don't even know what that is. It sounds like an awesome BLT. But that was really how I got started. It was very lonesome. It was very by myself. I self-studied. I had no help. Some of it just made sense. So I think there was a feeling that I think I'm okay at this. It's probably just like anything, maybe even now for those of you that are just starting or been around for a couple of years, some things you don't struggle with, some stuff you do. And it's those things you don't struggle with, I like to always ask myself the question, why am I finding this simple or easy? Maybe it's just, I just get it for whatever reason. When I got my first real IT job, it was at this place, and there was the main sysadmin, right? The guy that ran everything. It was this really weird hybrid environment of like Solaris boxes and like AIX and AD 2003 and just like this awfulness. And we had satellite offices in like Panama and England and South Africa and blah, blah, blah. And I literally got hired because one of the partners did a solid for someone that knew me. And when it was like, we need you to help clean up the IT, I'm like, oh, yeah, well, I can help with that. I was on like my hands and knees with paper towel, like wiping dust bunnies out of the server room. And like, just literally cleaning. That's how I got started. And one day, he got fired. I actually don't really know the reason why, but he got canned. And the boss came in and was like, all right, new sysadmin, get going. And I'm like, what? No, that's not cool. And I didn't know anything about what I was doing. So I learned very rapidly because I kind of had to. I don't think it's the greatest way to go about something, but it was kind of out of my hands. And it was when I experienced my first time with hacking. I didn't even know that was something I wanted to get into. I had enough network chops to get things connected and make them work and fix the partner's font on his phone. crap like that. We got breached, and someone was hosting the video content for their porn site on our servers. We had a lot of servers in high bandwidth. And they didn't steal anything, didn't go after anything. And I guess it was also my first experience with incident response and a little bit of forensics and threat hunting. Because we just knew something was wrong, but no one else there knew what to do about it. So I'm Googling, what do you do when porn's being hosted on your servers? And there's 7,000 results. It's step one, is leave it. It's good. So it was a really weird experience for me. And interestingly, that gentleman that got fired did one of the coolest things that I've ever seen in terms of conducting yourself. There was a day where we were really short-staffed, and out in the main bullpen where all the workers, all the main personnel there, other than the IT people, would be. We're really short-staffed, and I came in, and he was on the phone, dealing with business, talking to clients and customers and shit. I'm what? And I'm listening to him, this guy really understands the business. He knows all the process, he knows the names of the forms people have to fill out and whatnot. And I wound up asking him, I'm do you have a side job I don't know about? Are they making you partner next year? What is this? And he's no, man, it actually makes my job way easier. If I take an investment in understanding how this business operates, if I understand what they're trying to do, not only can I conduct my IT self better, but I have a potential to suggest really appropriate and thoughtful recommendations and solutions that might increase stuff. And I'll give you an example of where that goes horribly wrong. We had these old dot matrix printers, and the reason for that was the partner used to be a programmer, and he wrote this wrote this accounting software, and it was a terminal-based accounting program, and it would only print to these ancient printers. So I wound up writing sort of a hacked-up driver that would allow them to print to PDFs and modern printers. And it worked, and the workforce was so thankful. They were oh my God, thank you. And then I was so happy. I'm gonna go to the partner and tell him this. Nope. He was just what did you do? It worked the way it was fine. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm gonna hit on a point in another couple slides of when this kind of thing happens, where you think you're doing the right thing, I have something better to offer, and it's not wanted. And it's a weird kind of experience to have. But anyways, yeah, so doing the sysadmin thing, and I'm learning as I'm going. I learned probably the second most important life lesson I'd ever learned in IT. I don't know. I know you probably heard people say this. He's probably told it to you hundreds of times. I was asked to do something. I didn't know the answer. My natural brain wanted to look cool and look knowledgeable. So my normal reaction coming up was yeah, I know how to do that. Come on. And then I'm oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. But instead, I just kind of went, you know what, I don't know. You could give me an hour, is that okay? And I'll go research it and I'll come back. He was yeah, no problem. Saved my ass so many times after that. There's nothing worse than being yep, I know what I'm doing, and then you're ugh. And they're gonna see it. It's gonna come out. So there's no shame at all in ever saying I don't know, but give me a few minutes, let me go find out for you. It's an awesome, classy move to play, right? So after that, I kind of had a change of heart. It wasn't fulfilling me in any way, so I went back to music. And I went back to school. I was at Trevis. I was in the audio engineering program. And after that, I went to go work at a couple small studios, and ultimately I ended up at Cherry Beach Recording Studio, which is a very major recording studio here in Toronto. And I worked as an assistant engineer, which is like being a junior pen tester. The statement is, you have the ashtray ready to hold the senior guy's ash when he ashes. That's really what my job was. But I got to deal with all the technical stuff they didn't want to deal with anymore. So I got a lot of experience in that. And it was fun. It was really technical. But again, it wasn't rewarding me enough. I love music so much, but there was just something missing. I kept thinking about that last job I had and how we got hacked and what could I have done to stop it? The defender's remorse is starting to build in me, even though I'm not even a defender yet. So it was kind of weird when that happened. And I went back to school yet again. Someone had told me about penetration testing. I'd never even heard that phrase yet. And I'm well, that sounds bizarre. What the hell's pen testing? And told me about it, and told me about different schools that were teaching, ISSStions, and at the time there's a thing called the IACRB. I don't know if they're around anymore. And I took a course, and it was It was straight up hacking. They're like, here's what a reverse shell is. Here's how to blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wow, they're teaching this stuff now. This is crazy. It's like, am I going to like raid it at any moment? Is this a setup? Like, how is this legal and cool? So I start going through it, and when I took my exam, the exam was you were sent in the mail these disks that had ISOs on it for some VMs. Not the greatest start. But I'm like, okay. It was all old Red Hat Linux. That was the whole exam. Something that was going to come back and bother me much later in life. And one of the main ultimate flag was to get root. And you had to, in your report, give them the root password. And I had very little skills in all this stuff, but I had learned some things from being an admin working with a lot of Linux boxes that go on the fritz a lot. And that was called single user mode. And basically, I just took the exam VMs that they gave us, booted them into single user mode, and just set the root password and sent that back for my final. And they gave me the certificate, which is a horrible sign about the industry. And kind of on the spot, I realized that I did, I think, what a good hacker should do. I didn't follow the rules of the game. Right now, I don't mean that in the context of how to conduct yourself. I just meant I looked at the problem and I said, well, that seems like a lot of work. Maybe there's a shorter way to do it, the path of least resistance. And I just sort of like screwed them over by the fact that they sent me VMs. So I could just take ownership over the VM. But that left a lasting impression, which was, okay, so I didn't really deserve this certificate, but I just sort of hacked the exam. And I think that way of thinking would become indicative of how I would do the next bunch of years through my career. After a bunch of years in pen testing, I started to feel a problem. And now I'm going to start kind of hitting on some of the stuff, but the real reason why I wanted to come talk to you guys about things that are going on in the business and maybe what to expect a little bit. In pen testing, and again, everything I'm about to say is just in my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it. That's fine. You can come punch me outside if you hate what I'm saying. After a lot of them, and I would get more exposure to things that were happening in the real world, I would look at what the real bad guys were doing, and then I would look at what we were doing, apparently I thought for the purpose of protecting from those guys, didn't line up. The tradecraft they were using, the style and the intrusion sets and the TTPs they were using were not what we were testing for as pen testers, right? We were testing the exploitability of technical elements. We're not emulating any behavior. I'm not trying to simulate a certain threat actor. I'm just coming at you and being like, all right, what's the scan say? Oh, that port's open. And da-da-da-da-da. Couple Nessus clicks here, couple zap clicks there. And I felt really ashamed. I felt like I was taking money that I really shouldn't have because I was not understanding the correlation between what I thought I found for them and the actual threats that I would find out later they were dealing with. And that's when I started to understand there was a very big difference between why penetration testing is a thing and defending against threat actors. They are two very different things in my experience. So the way I dealt with this problem bothering me is I said, okay, I see a problem space. What I know how to do after 4, 5, 6 years now doesn't seem to line up with anything that I see in threat reports. I don't see Interpreter in there. I don't see Get System. Maybe the occasional MSO 867 still, but other than that, I'm not seeing Kali Linux anywhere. What is this? Where am I falling short? And I got fortunate enough to start meeting people just from the community and from stuff like this, who were people who worked in threat intelligence. And threat intelligence in various areas, right? I'll let your mind populate what that means. And I have kind of a big problem with threat intelligence in cyber and how it's used, how it's sold, how it's marketed. Not that it's not useful, just like pen testing. Very useful. I have a problem with how it's used. Threat intelligence for me, when I got my exposure to it, was my sort of opportunity to put down the console and start thinking about behavior and tradecraft and motive and funding and laws and geopolitics and all of this kind of stuff, right? Where I said, okay, there's a new threat report out on APT 2-for-1. They did this, and this. And I started looking at those threat reports and saying, do I know how to replicate these things. Right? It's not enough to just say, well, they got shells that reversed out to the internet. That doesn't mean you just go use reverse HTTP and Meterpreter. Was Meterpreter what they used? No? Well, then why are you using it? Was there infrastructure in this part of the world hosted here? Did they redirect you? How did they redirect you? Did they operate at certain times of the day? What were they going after? All of these kinds of things. I started asking my own technical ability to, if I was asked to replicate an actual threat, would I be able to? Do I have the chops based on my current knowledge and experience? And I didn't feel like I did. So the threat intelligence component became very important for me for what would ultimately change everything, was when I first started red teaming. Red teaming, just like threat intelligence, sadly, is another term now that's very buzzy and catchy. 10 pen testers in a room is not a red team, okay? Red teaming is a team. Your job is not to check for the exploitability of blah, 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 blah. Your job is to break in. Action on objectives. You're there for a goal. There's a motive behind it. There's a behavior behind it. We're here for something. Domain admin or not, I couldn't care less. Were you able to get to those jewels over there? Were you able to simulate business impact that would have cost them millions and they couldn't recover? Right? Could you have monitored them for a really long time without them knowing? Could you invalidate a current vendor's contract SLA that says we detect all threats in 1 hour, da-da-da-da-da? Can you make it not show up as an alert for 4? Congratulations, you just invalidated, pick a company. So that became very fascinating for me. And with red teaming, the thing that becomes really important is you realize you no longer really need to have to know everything. You're surrounded with a team of other people who are specializing in very specific buckets, and together as a team, you get to bounce your ideas and learn off them and whatnot. So I stopped feeling so guilty about, like, how am I going to learn all this stuff? Right? It's not my objective to. And through that process of dealing with red teaming, where basically you have to have the ability to throw away your toolkit you've been using for so long. Roll your own. Can you remove the common indicators from other known tools? Can you make your toolkit look like theirs? Right? Can you reverse their malware and immunize it to respond to your command and control? Things like this, which would inevitably lead me to where I am now, which is an adversary system design. And basically what that means is I listen to an organization and I say, well, what do you deal with? What kind of threats do you face? Do you know? Like, yeah, we worry about this threat actor, this kind of malware, this kind of attack. And I go, okay, who have you battled before that you're aware of? If not, we'll create the scenario and the case study for you, and we'll absorb all those tactics and indicators. And what I'm trying to do is actually get your stuff to fire and alert. That's what I'm there to do. I'm not there to evade you. I'm there to actually make sure the defensive teams can learn stuff. So that's really just, sort of from fixing Wi-Fi at my house to where I am today. Not the most orthodox paths, but thought I'd go through that a little bit. Okay, so state of the union as I've been kind of seeing things. So I'm going to move away from all this with the drink. Cybersecurity business. It is a business. It is driven very heavily by forces at work that want to make sure profits continue. Obviously, that's what all business is, profit. There's no one's in the business of losing money unless you're in some weird kind of stock shorting thing. But it is a business. I got into this stuff, and I know it can sound a little hokey, but to be completely honest with you, I got into this emotionally invested. I really wanted to try and contribute to make things a little safer, right? Like, I don't really care when so-and-so would get popped. I would care when it would start affecting people's personal information, like your grandmother's bank account, your cousin's email, or whatever it is. That stuff started hitting close to home. I thought like maybe there was something I could help with. As I started working in the workplace more and more and getting more exposure to the InfoSec community, you might have like a good idea or like, yeah, just patch it. And they're like, yeah, we have to have a board meeting about that and make a PowerPoint about patching and, like all that kind of stuff. And I didn't get it. I'm not really a business guy. Like I didn't make that connection. I'm like, what? Just click pat, just hit download updates, like just go. I never grasped that whole kind of thing. And so there's this whole economic cycle to things. And it's very hard in altruism and as a lone wolf or in a small team or in a boutique shop to combat the dollars that are put behind marketing and the dollars that are put behind keeping the status quo in check, the dollars that are put behind, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But do you even have the visibility to see if it's broke in the first place to know that we desperately need to fix this? I had a lot of problems with going through that. And there's things that bother me still to this day where I've met clients that are really unhappy with their current service providers. And I go, well, do you want to talk and switch it up? They're like, we'd love to, but we're locked in for like 5 years. It's one way if you have sort of a dodgy service and you're aware of that, you're going for numbers, companies will do things like just lock their clients into very long contracts. It kind of sucks, but that's the way things are. The skills and talent pool question. This one bugs me a lot. Did you talk about talent pool shortage or any of that stuff?
Not really, mostly just that there's work, lots of it.
Yeah, see, this is the thing. I have a few problems with the way this is kind of being talked about right now. There's a bit of blame on both sides. Now, I understand, some people here in their first year, you're studying, you want to go off into the scene and whatnot. I'm not seeing any shortage of places looking for people. Toronto in itself is weirdly small in that most things, if you go like LinkedIn and look at InfoSec jobs, like 90% of them are financial related, big fours and banks and stuff. Well, it's Toronto, right? But everyone's looking for stuff. I get, a ton of stuff on LinkedIn constantly like, hey, are you willing to come? I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm employed, did you not see? Like, what the hell? But there's no shortage. What I think there is a disconnect, right? This kind of ties in with the point after this unicorn problem, where one, you have an HR department who's lacking in technical knowledge, putting out, we're looking for a junior InfoSec professional who's willing to work for $40K, must have 97 years experience, is just awesome. And I'm like, where are you finding these people? It kind of baffles me that sort of dilemma. So there's this disconnect between, we know there's slots to fill, we know that. We know there's so many people studying this stuff. I mean, this stuff was not around when I started out. It's awesome that this exists now and exists in such volume, right? But at the same time, if the very place you're trying to say, look, I studied this, and this, here's my personal interest, here's the stuff I'm doing, and I see you're looking for a malware analyst, and they're like, yes, we are. You're hired, and now we're going to go stick you in that other room where they don't do malware analysis. It's like, well, why did you even hire me in the first place? Well, in the music industry, we used to have a problem that happened all the time. It's called shelving. And shelving is when you sign an artist because you know they're talented, but you have no idea how to use them. So you shelve them, basically. You put your creative control on them legally and say, you're not allowed to write any music, not to make any albums, because we own them. And if you do, we're going to put them on the back burner. So it's this sort of race where it's like DerbyCon right now. Everyone just bought tickets, and they didn't even know if they could go. But I'll buy them. And this thing happens in our industry too with hiring, right? It's crazy how this disconnect kind of happens. So I don't personally think there's a skill shortage. I think that's garbage, right? People are desperate to hire. If there's a shortage anywhere, I think it's in my original point, which is there's blame on both sides. I think organizations might not necessarily know what they need to hire. I think they're also restricted sometimes by the powers that be. But then at the same time, if you're going in as a InfoSec practitioner, what are you going in to bring? If you just came to school, and this is hard stuff, just like John said, and then after this, it's like, well, I spent a lot of time, I don't need to continue now. And then you go in, and I've literally sat in interviews where we do those horrible things. Where it's like, yes, I've been pen testing 9 years, and I just remind them back at the basics. Name me 6 TCP flags. And I don't really like that kind of stuff, but I usually do it to keep someone in check, right? I'm not going to hold it against them, but I'm like, yeah, man, you're forgetting your basics, right? Explain to me how DLL injection works. And not like, well, DLL loads into it. No, low level. I want to know. Tell me how, right? So unicorns, they don't exist, trust me. I mean, I've never met one yet. And the other problem right now that is worse than ever that I see, and this drives me crazy, is this diluting and hijacking of things like terminology and services and quality of stuff. So what I mean by this is probably all heard the term like puppy mills, like pen test puppy mills. These are things that directly affected me and our line of work, where the sort of one-click scan, I need to be compliant for something, so just help me tick the box, help me get that compliance thing. And as a service provider in pen testing, doing that, you can then take on volume of clients. You can automate almost all of it, right? And what happens is the value, the actual economic dollar and value of what your hourly wage is worth and what pen testing in itself should have remained to be when it was kind of in its glory day, has been brought down by this kind of, this way of doing business. The other thing that bothers me is the hijacking of terminology. You're free to define a word as you want. So never tell anybody they can't say what they want to. But it's like my problem with red team, right? Everyone's a red teamer now, apparently. And what that does is, to some of us that have been doing it a long time, or we hold it dear to our hearts, it becomes very complicated and very hard to then get the point across to new clients who actually do need a more mature level of testing done. Because their last experience they had was with a so-called red team, where it was two guys with Kali Linux running Nessus and Metasploit. That's all it is. And then that translates over onto the rest of us. So it doesn't always get received the greatest, but there's a part of what I've kind of done where I tend to be a little bit more outspoken. I tend to kind of call out the bullshit when I see it. And it doesn't always go well. I'm not offering that as advice, but it's something that I do try to stand up and fight against. The other thing that I see getting skewed in terms of the lines today is this is a cat and mouse game. I think because of how freely this information is available now, the fact that you can come to school, the fact that you can YouTube pretty much any technique you want, has diluted the fact that this is actually fairly important stuff and sensitive and responsible things you're learning. Anyone taking a cyber course anywhere, even if it's not about hacking, you probably in that first few months learned a few hacks. Probably learned how to crack some Wi-Fi, learned how to run a Metasploit exploit. You now know how to take over someone's machine. And we kind of just breeze through it like, yeah, whatever, big deal. No, man, this is, it's privileged, important stuff. There's a responsibility you have to have while using this, right? So this cat and mouse game, where basically, I always pose the question to people, does offense drive the innovation of defenders? Or does defensive innovation drive the innovation of attackers? I actually kind of pose that question to you. I don't really know, but what you'll end up seeing a lot of in the professional side of the world is things like, what was that one at Black Hat this year? Stops Mimikatz dead, like 100%. And then Benjamin Delpy, like
wow, Black Hat is
still going. There's like this bus sign.
Five minutes later, he posts on Twitter,
Yeah.
like, it just...
The author of Mimikatz is like, really? And irony is, did it hurt their sales in any way? Nope. And I'm not going to name the company, but find out who that is in about 2 seconds. There's an asynchronous nature to how this works. And what I mean by that is asynchronous warfare is a very interesting concept in itself. The bigger you are, the easier it is you are to attack in some way. The smaller I am, easier it is for me to remain hidden. So there's this cyclical thing that kind of happens. And I found pen testers can get stale. They can kind of stop what they're doing and be like, yep, I've known enough. It works on every pen test I'm on. I don't need to learn more. The attackers are not doing that. They are at it 24/7. And I think to one of John's points about show that you're working really, really hard, that stuff resonates to, like, when we're looking at people for a red team, those are the kind of qualities we're looking for. Those like obsessive, like this thirst for must know more tricks kind of thing. If you ever feel that, and probably a lot of you do, and you start feeling it go away, address that, because that's the neat stuff. That's the goal, right? It's not like this is just my paycheck. It's, oh man, I got to learn more tricks. I got to learn more stuff, more techniques. Like, that's the driving force for myself, right? And I kind of cheated into that last point, but oh man, the marketing right now, my God, I can't get over the stuff I'm seeing, and it's believed. I got to hear, I think I may said this last time I was here. I got to catch wind of something called pink teaming for the first time.
Purple team.
No.
Purple teaming's legit.
Purple teaming's a good thing. Pink teaming.
There's also lime and...
Oh yeah, I'm sure there is. But the definition of this one's what got me. Pink teaming was intentionally watered down pen testing. Charge a little less, put a little less effort in, a little less man hours. People don't, it's very easy to be greedy and be like, me, now let's just cash in as fast as we can before this whole thing breaks. And then there's the guys like myself who are trying to stand up against that, who go, you know what, fine, our rate's going up. That's simple, you know. It's very dangerous. And when you go work in different places, you don't have to feel loyalty. You might be there for a year or two, but you'll see this stuff. You'll hear the very things that you're selling. You know, you'll be working at an organization, say, you know, we're going to introduce threat intelligence as a service, managed threat intelligence. You go, cool, awesome, that sounds fun. And they go, yeah, start telling the clients. Should we like build the practice first? That might be good. They're like, no, you don't want to, it's coming. Just sell it. Like, that's fucking crazy to me, man. So now I just kind of want to dart all over the place and come to some things I've experienced that have made life a lot harder for me. School. I did not know that InfoSec would involve a lot of math, especially as I got into programming and things like that. I was terrible at math, really bad. Still am. I'm horrible. I was good at for some reason I was really good at trig. I used to work in the billiards business for a while, so I liked angles. It didn't help in any way. I wish I was great at like algebra and calc and all this other stuff, but I didn't take it seriously. That number one drawback that I have, any advice I have, like don't do, is don't game, not game first, game later. Game is the reward. I had that attitude. I was like, no, I'm fine. I'll just play 30 minutes. I know this. 9 hours later, I'm just like, oh, the exam just ended. Shit. Yeah, you know, like it really hurt. I didn't take education seriously, right? Which is funny now because this is actually the kind of stuff I tend to be the most involved with now because I think it's my way of like making up for it, right? But I really was a terrible, terrible student. I don't want to label this as negative, but I was very emotionally invested in InfoSec, still am. I take things very personally, and that's not always good. I can get very offended by that, whether it's an event that's happened somewhere else, a breach, or it's just a person saying a thing I don't necessarily like, because I think it's harmful in some way. It's good to have emotions. And like the pro and con list to this was it gave me determination. I was very passionate, still am. I get heated. I'm sure my face is red already. When I talk about this kind of stuff, I really get into it. And on the negative side of that, it's not the best office behavior when it's just like, hey, there's another incident. You're like, what the fuck? You know, it's not telling the manager like beat it. It's not great. I'll tell you guys a very quick story, and I'm gonna pretty much wrap up after that. When I was working somewhere, I got sent on a suicide mission that I would find out later on. I got sent to do a pen test because someone was trying to butt in as a higher executive partner or manager kind of thing. And they sent me down to go do this pen test with two very clear objectives. You have to do this, you have to get this. I had to do this specific man-in-the-middle thing, which I thought was a really weird request. And, domain admin or bust. Okay. So I go down there. They stick me. I was supposed to be like the senior consultant, like just watch these two other pen testers, make sure they're not breaking anything. Their senior guy just leaves. He's like, oh, you're here? Okay. Takes off. I'm like, what? And I'm stuck with this guy, and I go, how long have you been doing this, man? He's like, oh, I just finished school last week. I'm like, great. Hey, super nice guy, couldn't have been more lovely, and I taught him a lot. He was really a good student when we were working. And I'm not finding these domain admins anywhere, and I know my Active Directory pretty well. And this man-in-the-middling thing started feeling really weird because I was seeing the types of traffic they were doing, transactions, financial transactions like crazy. And I hunt down their director, and I'm like, listen, I feel a little embarrassed, but I'm not finding any domain admins anywhere on this network that we're on. He's like, oh, there's none here. I'm like, you sure? He's like, very. He's like, yeah, not on this segment, no. And we weren't allowed to break out. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, anyways, I'm about to start in the man-in-the-middle thing, and he's like leaving. He's like, no, you're not. You're not doing any of that. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, that's cool. He's like, if this thing goes down, you don't understand the damage in millions that would cost, by the second. I'm like, okay, definitely not doing that. And then I start putting two and two together, and I email back my manager, and they get in touch with this other person that set it up. And they start shaming me. And all I can think back, I had to leave Toronto for this test, is I'm coming back to Toronto, and the whole time, this is my professional attitude at this time. I'm like, all right, so I'm gonna get in town about 10 a.m. Everyone will be at the office. I'll grab a coffee at Union. I'll walk in the front door. I'm gonna go in his office and I'm gonna punch him in the fucking mouth. Dead serious. Dead serious. It's not a cool attitude, right? There's nothing neat about that at all, right? It's not that funny. And I was actually deathly serious about that, because that to me is a normal response mechanism to dealing with the problem. And my manager sees me coming up the thing like, "Gah!" And immediately he's like, nope, outside, let's go, let's have a talk, and kind of calm me down. And I bailed. That was it. It was my last day. And I went off and I started Red Black. That was the end of it. I was like, okay, I see how this works. Just for me. That was only my experience. It doesn't happen to everybody, right? But what this kind of ties into is this next point of it's not your company. I kind of had to learn that. Like, you might work somewhere and be like, oh, that's a great idea. Or why are we doing things this way? It's bullshit. You're like, well, then you go make a company and do it your way. It's not yours. And I kind of accepted that. So I was like, fine, I'll leave. And like went and started something up. It was really hard to do, but it's a common misconception that, you know, the thing you might want to say or suggest or improve upon is going to be well received. It's not. It doesn't mean no one likes you. It doesn't mean it's not a good idea. It just means it's not the time, the place, or just your say. You know what I mean? So it's okay if you kind of have to let that go. Which comes into the next one. Everyone wants to be friends. Also not true, I found out. I like working with a team who are my friends. I can hang out with them, I can drink with them, we can hang out at the cottage, we can jam, whatever it is. I prefer that. A lot of people don't. They want work is work, personal separate, right? Absolutely fine. Just keep that in mind, because if you're like me, you kind of want everybody to become like a drinking friend. And it's just, not everyone wants to. And then back to emotional investment, I get personally offended, and cycle repeats itself, right? Quality versus cost, kind of touched on this already, where just because you might have the better thing, you know, like, I'm a better pen tester than that person, so you should work with me. No, not necessarily. You might not want to. Maybe they're in a contract, and they just don't care that you're better. Maybe they don't need that maturation level. People, junior red teamers really start to feel that. They're like, we're a red team. We do mature stuff. I'm like, yeah, well, not everyone is. Like, not everyone wants that. That's okay. You have to rise through that, right? And I think the most important, the thing I struggle with today, daily, I struggled with it earlier today. To be honest with you, it's probably only been the last 3 or 4 years I've kind of come to terms with these, is humility and help. I did not ask for help for a very, very long time. I didn't have any InfoSec friends. Right? It was myself, pretty much up to like 2014. I kind of just stayed to myself, taught myself, didn't ask for help. And humility. I know it all. I can learn this. It's probably, whatever. Wasn't the case. I don't know why, but it was really difficult for me to exercise humility. Say, I don't know. You know, I might not be that smart. Can you help me if you're willing to? And then what can I do for you? Massive. Once I started opening that, the guys I think are like the top PowerShell and AD guys are like my friends now. And like we swap info we don't share on Twitter and stuff. Just by like reaching out and being like, I don't know. It was a really excellent thing for me to try and work on, and I struggle with it a lot. So this is the last slide. I'm sorry, I'm running a little long here. Just some general piece of advice that I've personally found. In the beginning, everything seems big. You got, how am I going to learn all of this? And I'm sure you may have heard the pen test funnel kind of analogy, or, you know, recon. You just get everything short in the funnel. As you add, it drills down, and at the very end, you have this very specific thing you're supposed to do. Knowledge and experience is like that. It goes in, and as you progress over time, you'll start to carve out little niches for yourself. You start to realize, I really like this. This is really where I want to study more and be excellent at. There's nothing wrong with trying lots of gigs. You know, like, you don't, if some people care about the whole, like, you know, show that you stay with a company for 3-5 years and do the loyalty thing, absolutely fine. You can do lots of gigs inside of a single organization. But one of the best threat hunters I know got like the bulk of his experience in help desk. He got to see the first thing, the phishing, my computer, this show keeps popping up, blah, 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 blah. Going in other departments, understanding how the business functions, right? Making mistakes is great, depending, like, you know, no one's getting promoted for like crashing, you know, the Active Directory force. But this is sort of my ultimate point. All I have ever done is made mistakes. honestly, I know that's very, it's the light bulb analogy, 10,000 ways how to not make one. That's what it's been like. All I've ever really done is made mistakes. Right? I failed up. Mistakes are excellent learning tools because the way I think of them is mistakes on their own can have bad consequences sometimes, depending on what it is. But the growth part, the part that's going to propel you and progress your experience and your knowledge and your ability, is going to be from what did you do from the mistake? What did you learn about it? Right? I know a lot of guys who still don't understand certain exploits that crash systems. They don't get that that's why it's happening. I'm like, well, okay, now you know. And then they're like still doing it. I'm like, is my fucking word getting in at all? There's nothing wrong with those mistakes. Use them. They're very helpful. A couple things that I think I saw on the last couple of John's slides. This is security. Right? Play nice. There's a lot of people in this. It's a small community. You don't have to like everyone. And oh man, am I guilty of this. And I'm even worse because once I don't get along with someone, I like cement into being jaded that I will not get along with them. Like fine, forget them. But try to play nice. All right? This is sensitive stuff we're dealing with. Okay? Contribute, give back where possible. Do your blogs. Come here. Talk to first-year students. Share some research. Whatever it is. Go nuts with it. Right? I really believe in that. You'd be surprised what gigs will actually help you out with skills in other areas. Kind of ties in with the try lots of gigs. But like I learned a ton of information in the audio world that helped me with IT and security later on. So nothing stupid. There's no stupid questions. I hate that. Just like that wrong attitude thing. I hate when it's like, you're doing it wrong. I can't stand that. Someone with that attitude, yeah, I'm burning their resume. I'm not even going to listen to you. I like that kind of attitude to have. And then finally, I've said this, I think, a couple times already. I really mean this. I like drilling this point home. We are learning really special things. We are being entrusted with the knowledge, right, where you can, if you really wanted to, invade someone's life or an organization or cause problems and damage. Right? Now, your motives for it, I can't tell you. But all I can say is it's a little bit of that with power comes responsibility thing. Right? This stuff is pretty powerful. I mean, just look in the news. You got commodity malware taking down government agencies. Right? Use that responsibility wisely. And to be super corny is the last thing I'm going to say. And God, I hope I'm quoting this right. I think it was Gandhi who said, be the change you want to see in the world. Whatever problem you think exists right now, you know how you're most likely going to change it? Be that thing. Have that attitude. Stand up for this. Work on that thing you think you might have a solution for. I mean, I can't encourage you for that enough. And if any of this kind of offensive, red teamy, threat emulation, adversary system stuff seems interested to you, every single thing I've talked about here is probably more in line with getting you to that level or to work with us or whoever it is. So with that being said, I thank you guys very much for letting me rant again. Any questions?
Yeah, it was awesome.
Cool.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, no, that's too
long. For those of you who are new to this, usually after sessions we hop over across the street to Monahan's for a pint and some food. And again, just so you are aware, it is 19 plus. So yeah. Anyways, thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you in a couple weeks.